Welcome to the Unearthed Man Podcast, the journey to becoming a conscious man, hosted by Milva. Hey all, Milva here, and welcome to episode 5 of the Unearthed Man Podcast. For all those who have provided comments and feedback, thank you very much. If this is your first time listening, certainly welcome aboard. If this is episode 5 you listen to, then thank you very much for definitely being what I'll call a loyal supporter of the podcast. On episode 4, I did mention that my next guest was going to be Reggie Farmer. For all those who were waiting for the episode, my apologies. You might have to wait another couple of weeks. Reggie and I are doing a part 1 to part 2. We've successfully recorded part 1, but we couldn't quite align our schedules for part 2. So the recording of that is coming up within the next week. So the intent is probably in about 2 weeks' time, you'll get a back-to-back run of episodes of Reggie Farmer. So definitely make sure you tune in for that one. But certainly doesn't mean drop off now, because the guest that I have today is certainly an amazing man. Somebody who I find challenges me, someone who helps me continually think through my belief system and how I operate. He certainly sees the world through a different set of eyes than all of us, and he has a really simple viewpoint about how life can operate and how you can be successful in a simplified life, yet also be, if you like, financially successful off the back of that. So that is certainly coming up soon on the rest of the episode. One of the things that has popped up is, over the last couple of episodes, I've asked for people to provide feedback and comments or to make sure they're subscribing. And the question was asked, why am I doing that? Is that because I'm still seeking external validation of what I'm doing and how I'm operating? And is that about stroking the ego? Or am I actually doing it to ways of improving? So in sitting down and thinking about it, I'm probably 50-50. Yeah, there's part of me who wants the feedback, who wants to be told I'm doing a good job, who wants to know that, hey, this is coming along really well. It's a great professional outfit or whatever happens to be. So yeah, there is an element in that, and I'm exploring that at this point in time. From a different aspect though, yes, feedback is great because that's how we learn, and then we can improve, and I can actually put subtle changes into the podcast to make it more listenable. So if there is feedback from a listening perspective, then certainly send it through. On the other aspect, I'll just continue to work through, what validation I am and am not seeking. So that's probably just where I'm sitting. So as you know, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. The podcast is up on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, TuneIn, Google. Plenty of places you can find, or just go direct into the Buzzsprout site. So I'm not going to continue on anymore, and now I'm just going to let us now move on and get on with episode 5. My guest grew up in a household with a mother as an energy healer and yoga master, and a father who devoted his life to truth. In his early adult life, he spent it committed to building a large marketing company, which led to many entrepreneurial adventures, only to realize that chasing money, cars, and riches was not leading to the happiness that was promised by the Western dream, so the search turned within. Nearly 3 years ago, he moved to Vanuatu, a small island in the South Pacific, looking for a different way of living. He is now living a sustainable life on a 14-hectare homestead in the tropics and devotes his time to supporting others find true happiness. Welcome to the Unearthed Man Podcast, Sam Lewis.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, no worries at all, Sam. So you and I first met at Unleash the Beast in November last year as part of my awakening or initiation into this new world that I found myself. How often have you done Unleash? What's your been involvement with Unleash over the time?
Look, I've coached and supported in all of them. We've done 3 now. We've done 2 in Brisbane, and then we did 1 in LA. So I've been lucky enough to support and coach in those ones and help facilitate that, and they're a lot of fun as well.
Well, absolutely. I think that's what I got out of it. A lot about the comradeship and knowing that you can support men. The one thing that I did take out of it, and there's a word that's now embedded in my brain, and to be honest, it's actually been a very beneficial word. It's called the gooch. Um, do you want to talk through what the gooch actually means and how you've used that before to help men, particularly in some of the activities that we're doing?
Yeah, gooch I think is a bit of a Australian slang, but the correct name is the perineum, and it's basically the place in between your asshole and your genitals. And what that is I mean, that's the anatomy of it. But spiritually, it's the base chakra. So it's the base chakra from where it's your power chakra. And some of the work I do, I work with Kundalini energy, and that's the base of the Kundalini. So by activating your, quote unquote gooch or your perineum, what happens is that it activates your Kundalini, and that should work its way up your spine through the chakras and then out the crown of your head. And it's a good way to activate. It's a good way to activate energy, whether that be spiritual energy or just physical energy. And we use it in Unleash the Beast. We work with transmuting sexual energy. So to take that sexual energy that starts in your base and around that genital area and bring that up into your heart space. So rather than you approaching, situations, especially with women, from a sexual standpoint, you're able to transmute that energy into your heart, so you can come. I suppose that you can communicate with women, and you can have an interaction with women from a heart space and not from a genital space. Which in Unleash we have some practices around that. Don't want to give away too much.
No,
but it's a very different approach. Coming from the heart opposed to coming from your balls.
and I just want to explore that a little bit more, because the one thing that I don't think guys generally understand is that where the core of our energy and where the core of the women's energy, or where we both operate from, where we're going to start to touch on, it comes from two different spaces. And I don't think a lot of men understand that, a lot of our energy is driven from that area between our belly button, and the perineum and the gooch. And that's where, channeling it correctly, you can actually end up with, as you said, a lot of power and a lot of different ways about how you go about thinking and operating on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah, it's just it's about channeling that energy. I mean, it's a tantric practice, and people have been doing this for thousands and thousands of years, and it's these ancient practices. It's sometimes forgotten about in our Western society. We feel we don't have the time for it, or the need for these ancient practices. But used in the right context, in the right in the right place, they're extremely powerful.
And one of the things, that I've taken away from it, and this probably, this won't let out on anything that we did on Unleash, but I've actually found, and this is why I'll go back and use the term, what's firmly embedded in my mind, the gooch. I know that when I'm in sexual activity with my wife, that previously I was a fairly early ejaculator. I'm now finding that, funny enough, if I actually drop the word the gooch into my mind, and then that reminds me to actually effectively take into that tantric practice, my control has dramatically increased, and my ability to, sustain sex for a longer period of time, and also sustain my own sexual energy and be more present in what's taking place, rather than that huge, all of a sudden, the adrenaline kicks in, the excitement kicks in, the breathing gets short. Next thing, you come really quickly. And actually being able to just have a buzzword or a keyword that just drops in your mind can actually be hugely beneficial, and you can actually get a lot out of it sexually as you go forward.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah. And that's the case. It's a combination of that. And you also said the breath, to be able to control the breath. And, I'm not no sex coach or anything like that. Definitely don't claim to be. I'm more of a meditation guy, but you use very similar energies in meditation, and transmuting that sexual energy, the base energy, up into the heart and up into the crown chakra, is what we do in meditation. But yeah, it definitely can be used in sexual practices. And I've had a chat to a lot of guys that have that have, funnily enough, from the work that we've done in Unleash or talks I've had to them, has improved their sex life. So that's amazing.
Yeah. So all I know is that my wife is certainly much happier from me knowing the word the gooch. Um, the other thing that I want to chat to you about, Sam, is I'd never come across the term innerpreneur before. I'd always seen everything out there operating in the corporate space. Everyone is, you're either a corporate person, a self-employed person, or you're this entrepreneur. And an entrepreneur is someone who's willing to fail many times and but continually tries to drive business and has the courage to keep doing things. The term innerpreneur, what does that look like for you, and what was that change? What moved you from the entrepreneur that we did on the introduction to becoming an innerpreneur, and what does that actually mean for you?
Okay, it's look, it's just a play on words. It's a play on words, and I've been an entrepreneur my whole adult life. I've never had a job in my adult life. I sort of opened a business when I was very young, fresh out of school, and have always done some sort of entrepreneurial activity, from running a marketing company. I owned a boxing gym. I was a boxing promoter for a while, and now I do some coaching and also run a marketing company. So that entrepreneurialism was kind of in my blood, if you like, and it was something that I was very passionate about. And I don't think I'll ever have a job or work for the man in my lifetime. And then I suppose over time, the whole idea of entrepreneur is it's somebody that is self-made, that creates from themselves. So the swing intrapreneur it's about creation from within. Innerpreneur is about the creation from within. So it's somebody that creates, but creates from a space within, or searches within to find answers, opposed to the outward search that we generally do, or what we see as entrepreneurs and driving Ferraris and living in houses and private jets and all that sort of stuff. So it's a little bit of a swing on it. What led me down that path is I was just, after doing business and, buying the sports cars and buying houses on the beach and Swiss watches and doing all that gig, I realized that it was an insatiable need for me to want more. And that need for me to want more and more and more, and forever chasing a target that was moving. As soon as I'd achieved one thing, there was a short amount of, satisfaction from it. Before I moved on to the next target, I just realized that this is insatiable. It's never going to end. It's a forever moving target, and it's not leading to happiness. So I really went back to my roots. You mentioned at the beginning that, I grew up in a household. I suppose parents had strong philosophical beliefs. Parents both yogis. So I really went back to my roots and started to have a look within. And, this was the whole shift and the move to Vanuatu and living on a sustainable, homestead and having our own property and our own food, our own water, our own power. And just going back to the simple way. And I find a lot more peace in that, in really looking within for happiness, opposed to chasing something that's forever moving. So that's, so I put together this innerpreneur, and it's just it's a swing on entrepreneur, because I'm very passionate about entrepreneurialism. But I do believe that, the true happiness is found within.
And just on that point, you actually now you run a program, or you've run a program where you are looking to bring other entrepreneurs across to Vanuatu to experience the beauty of the land and that place. I've seen some of your videos of where you live, and it's just simply amazing. Looks like one of the most beautiful places on earth. So you're looking to now expand that out and help others go down that same path?
Yeah, definitely. Me and one of my brothers, Brendan Durrell, he labels himself as the inner light warrior. We put together a program and a retreat in Vanuatu, which is called Innerpreneurship. So it's a 5-day retreat where we basically work on going within. Lots of meditation, lots of breath work, and some really strong semantic practices. And we basically use the elements, the 4 elements, which are very ripe in Vanuatu. I mean, there's lots of water, lots of nature, and we use the elements, the fire, the wind, the earth, and the air. We use those elements to be able to go within, and then to go within and then create outwardly from there through manifestation processes. So it's quite a special journey, and it really does help that you're right, it is in one of the most beautiful countries in the world, in my opinion. I've also, real quickly, I've also just at the moment we're just I've put together a program that's starting in July, on the 22nd of July, which is it's meditation, manifestation, and I work with principles of the universe. There's seven laws of the universe that have come through in so many different texts at different times and different places in the world. Too many that it's for it to be a coincidence. So I've really looked into these universal principles and how they work, and put a program together around that. So that's an online thing that I'm doing as well. Excellent.
Yeah, I've actually seen that up there as well. And I'm glad you touched on that, because one of the topics that I wanted to talk to you about, so it's a nice little segue, is, a lot of us, if we think through, there's a lot of self, the ego and the self-centered. Then some people see themselves as being worldly. Some people, see themselves as being universal or so forth. But, just on that point, the seven laws of the universe, I think I might have got that wrong, but those 7 items that have come through, I noticed that you transcended it a bit more into that, we are one, we are connected with everything, there's an energetic connection. And so when people talk a bit on, spiritual side, or I'm a yogi, or I do meditation, that is still a bit of a play on self-ego, as opposed to, are they truly connected? Can you talk through where you're at yourself in relation to this, connection to, animals, plants, the earth, the water, the universe that's around us?
Okay. Yeah. Look, it's a principle called Advaita, which is a Sanskrit word for all is one. So the Advaita principles, which I was brought up in a household. My dad's a follower of an Indian saint called Sri Ramana Maharshi. He's one of the more well-known Indian saints, and more revered. But he followed these principles, and the principle is all about non-duality. Okay, so it's all about non-duality, and is looking at the self, the individual self, as the Sam or the Stephen, rather than looking at us as being individual, having a look about what's beyond that, what's beyond the Sam and what's beyond the Stephen, who are we at the core. And through certain meditation practices and also philosophy, you can really have a look at what's behind it. I'm talking to you right now, but who's controlling that? Who's controlling, the thoughts coming through, and then who's controlling you can say the mind, and then you say, well, who's controlling the mind? And you dig into this, and this is the self-inquiry practice. And you come to an answer that it's everything is really the same, and we're all part of this universal consciousness, which opens up a whole lot of things, because especially in the personal development world, it's very much about looking at the individual self and the trauma in the individual self, and how that trauma plays out in your life, where these principles look beyond that. So rather than identifying yourself with being Stephen or with being Sam, rather than identifying with that, because identifying with that comes with all the human issues that come with it, the traumas, you identify with what's beyond that, which is whole and complete. And then it's a very interesting practice, because I've found that these traumas just seem to fall away. Everybody's got their childhood shit and stuff that they grew up with, but to not resonate or to not identify with these traumas of the ego or of the person or of the individual, makes them really irrelevant and a really, really small thing. It's a very interesting practice, I suppose. I want to, lots of people explain this, and it's, Rumi's got some, some amazing stuff. And the Rumi quote that everybody would have heard of is, you are the drop in the ocean. You are not the drop, you are the ocean. So it's, rather than identifying as the drop, which has a whole lot of human stuff attached to it, you identify as the ocean, which is just so much bigger and so whole. And then you have a look at your little ego drop, and it's really irrelevant in the vastness and the whole scheme of the ocean. So I hope that answers your question. It's a long chat to have, this one, but it's I hope that answers your question in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, it does. And just to probably explore that a little bit further. So there's a lot of the conversation about, how do we raise, the global consciousness? How do we, because if we look at that, the consciousness as being driving a energy, and if we're all just seen as energy, all connected through an energy source, then the more that we can actually be looking outside ourselves or outside our identity and looking at ourselves as as you said, the ocean and not the drop in the ocean, surely that allows us to then change how we as a combined energy ball or an energy group and consciousness to actually change that energy vibration and how we actually operate globally and universally, in just how we see things and how people feel about things, and how we can actually get more joy, happiness, love happening, because there's a different vibrational field that we can actually drive.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's so important. I mean, we've got mass separation going on around the world without getting into it. I don't want to give it too much energy, but there's this mass separation, and that it really seems that the powers that may be are trying to separate us, further away from each other, and stop us from realizing this truth. And a good analogy is us as humans, we resonate with ourselves, and we think ourselves are, is everything. So, I mean, you wouldn't cut off your hand, because you'd understand, one, that would hurt, and two, you'd miss your hand. But if you change that perspective and you don't look at yourself as being whole, you look at yourself as being part of everything. You wouldn't chop off somebody else's hand, or you wouldn't segregate from another race or another species even. Because you see it as part of a whole. And I think, it covers just so many bases, from the current issues, which is racism, to all sorts of environmental issues as well, with all sorts of stuff around, the cruelty to animals, to the way we treat the planet that we live on. If you see everything as whole, and you see yourself as part of that, you're not going to chop off your hand, are you? So.
Oh, could not agree more with it, Sam. Absolutely couldn't agree more. The interesting thing that someone actually had sent to me once, and again, it's about the connection in energy, is, if the moon has the ability to actually make the tides go in and out, why don't we think that some of the other energies that sit within the universe we operate have the ability to affect us on a day-to-day basis?
Of course. Yeah.
And I think that's, for me, that's an ability to go, that helps understand that we are connected to, this wider energy field that's actually around us, because, it's not just the moon, it's the sun, and it's the planets, and how they actually operate and how they circle around us, has to create a whole lot of different energy fields that, if we are in ourselves, just made up of very, very tiny energy balls that are interacting together, then there has to be ways that we get impacted, but we can also impact on others that are around us by choosing how we use that energy and how we decide to channel that energy.
Yeah, I mean, look, the moon's a brilliant example, because, I mean, if the moon can move the tides, which is billions and billions of tons of water that it's moving, what does that do to the human makeup? What does that do to the human who, humans are 78% water or something like that. So if the moon's affecting the ocean, okay, and able to affect the ocean, which is millions or billions of tons of water, what does that do to our system, and how does that affect? And it's quite funny. I mean, places like correctional facilities, so jails, mental institutes, they know this. And they, around full moon time, they actually tighten up their security, because they know that, potentially this sends people a little bit, it's a heightened state of emotion around full moons. And if that emotion is sometimes reflected in a negative way, that can be heightened. On the same turn, around the full moons, if your projection of energy is positive, that can also be heightened. That can also be brought up as well. So it's a very interesting concept, that.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely, and it's fun, as you said. It's hours worth of conversation, not a half hour. So we're only really scratching the surface and touching on this. So just on a different question for you, because for me this podcast is about being totally open and explore everything and all topics. For me, that's the more I'm been through the process, the more I'm learning just to open my mind, open my heart, and let things open. So thoughts on where we're at, because I know I'm becoming more in tune with this, but where we are as in previous life and future lives, and the role we're playing now. Your beliefs in relation to, this is all it is, or we've actually been somewhere before, we've now deliberately been put into the earth at this point in time to affect our true purpose here before we actually get to move on to what's held ahead of us.
Well, I subscribe to the idea of reincarnation. I just really can't make sense of anything else. So I definitely subscribe to this idea of reincarnation, and I believe that we are on this planet to learn. This idea of having a purpose, I don't believe I believe that's a trick of the ego. This idea of having a purpose, my purpose is to do this in life, or whether that purpose is to save the world or whether that purpose is to make $1 million. I do believe that's a trick of the ego, and I believe we're here just to learn. We've got to remove, this is the thing, when we talk this conversation, you've really got to remove the idea and the concept of duality, which is the good and the bad, the up and the down, the black and the white. So you've really got to remove these ideas and these concepts. And we come here on this planet to get the lessons that we need for our soul to evolve. Now, for our soul to evolve, and our soul's only purpose in my belief structure is to return home, and that's to return home to the source, return home to God, and become one again. So I believe we come to this planet, we're incarnated to come to this planet to learn the lessons. Now, sometimes those lessons are favorable to the ego, and people have successful, wealthy, happy lives. And sometimes those lessons are less favorable, and we're stuck in famine, and we've got all sorts of trauma and horrible stuff that happens to us. But who are we to say what's good and bad? We've really got to remove that good and bad. And I think it's a question of growth, and not so much whether we're getting ahead in life, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. It absolutely does, because the other paradigm, or want for a better word, is whether we had our children, or whether our children chose us to help us learn the lesson that we need to learn whilst we're actually here in this space.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination of both. And then from an absolute standpoint, what we talked about, do we really differ from our children, and aren't we all the same? From that. But yeah, if we're having a look at a very human standpoint, I think it sort of goes both ways. Our kids are here to teach us, and we're here to teach our kids. And there's probably some sort of connection with the people that you are closest to, that I believe that potentially lasts lifetimes, and not just this lifetime. And sometimes you meet those people and you just go, hey, like I know you, or I've known you in the past. And there is that connection that you get straight away. And I believe that's potentially a past life, or a previous life. And I say that in inverted quotes. I know we don't have the video going, but I'm going inverted quotes. But and let's not call it a past life. Let's call it a different life. But in a different life, we definitely knew this person. That's why there's such a connection. people call it soul connection, twin flames, all this sort of stuff. But I definitely believe that our relationships last longer than a lifetime.
Yeah, no, and same thing, certainly agreed. And I'm finding, myself 12 months ago, 2 years ago, we wouldn't have been having this conversation because I would have thought you're a quack. I would have thought that you're sitting on another planet. But, the one thing I think, as you're saying, is you start to look more inward and you start to ask more of those questions. Most of the reasons why I would think that, I would just dismissed it was because I had chosen based on a level of preconditioning or whatever else that, there was a right or wrong. And to your point, once you move that duality of what's right or what's wrong, and you just go, okay, let's just think through this and see what it looks like. It is all feasible and all possible, and I'm certainly becoming more and more aligned to, there was something previous, there is something ahead. This is just part of my soul's journey that I'm on, and I just need to work through, what it is that my soul wants me to learn while I'm here, and if I can learn and then I can actually help pass that on to others, and if others can then go on their learning journey, then I think that when I leave here, that my time here will be definitely fulfilled.
Yeah, and it's for me, it's such an easier way to live because I mean, we all have very human things that happen to us and things that shit us and piss us off and upset us, and there's a whole array of emotions that we go through as humans, but it's a lot easier to move through those emotions when you see them as lessons, and lessons that whether you believe it or not, these are beneficial lessons, and these are growth. And from my experience, the more painful that lesson, the more suffering in that lesson, the more growth there is in it. So to be able to come out certain situations in your life that are challenging with the idea that this is going to support my growth is an amazing way to flip everything on its head. And it's very easy to move through emotional states with that philosophy.
Oh, yeah. And again, definitely agree with that. So I think, Sam, just before we probably finish up, so for the men and women who are listening in on this podcast, any sort of last thoughts in relation to, men who may be, still chasing that Ferrari or the Rolex watch or whatever they're actually out there? Any thoughts or suggestions as to, what they could now do to, turn around and start to look at more inward happiness as opposed to chasing that external materialization?
Yeah. Look, I just think, where it's the external, we're chasing something that's not permanent or present, fully permanent and fully present. I mean, we may buy a Ferrari, we may buy a flash house, but that's not going to carry with us into our next life. And that's not going to carry with us, eternally. It may create some sort of status symbol in a certain lifetime. But for me, it's about resonating and identifying with what is truly eternal and truly permanent, and always present. And that's that's that benevolent, that's that force. Some call it God, some call it source. I call it the absolute. But when you sort of get in touch with that and you run your life or resonate and identify with that, opposed to things that are just going to disappear, and not only disappear, but things that are goals are forever going to change, you find a peace in life. And I really think, we as humans, we chase happiness. But unfortunately, happiness continually moves, and happiness is really left up to perspective, where the search for peace is very much different. Where we look for peace, you'll find happiness within peace, and peace is eternal and it stays with you. So yeah, it's for me, and any I suppose whenever I have a chat to someone, because a lot of people do come to me around this, and entrepreneurs, and that have made good money, but realize that they didn't bring happiness and they want to look for something else. I just say look within, and look and resonate with what's permanent. identify with what's permanent and, leave all the other stuff alone, because that will just leave you chasing forever. And there's, it's a mountain that you'll never climb.
Thanks, Sam. That's brilliant advice. I think, I love that concept of just, I haven't actually heard someone put it in that terms of, look for something that's actually permanent, because you're right. All the other items, actually, the number of watches I've got in the drawer somewhere is ridiculous, because, they look good at a point in time, but they didn't do anything. They're not permanent, just hanging around. So, I think I love that concept, and it's something that I think I'll start to look at and introduce as I look to restart my meditation practice that I know I've dropped off recently. So it's something on my radar to get going. So, Sam, thank you very much for your time today. Thanks for jumping in and dialing in from beautiful Vanuatu.
Beautiful. Thanks for having me.
No worries, old mate. And you take care, and you enjoy the actual, what is probably warm weather compared to this chilly day here in Melbourne. So take care, and beautiful chatting, man. Look after yourself.
Okay. Thank you.
That was the great Sam Lewis. And I hope you all agree that definitely is a different aspect and something more for us to all think about off the back of that. So that's it for episode 5. Again, thank you for listening. You can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. I hope you have a beautiful day. Sending you much love and peace. Until episode 6, I'm out, the Unearthed Man.